It's great to be here. This is the second time we've done the talk this morning, and I've been told to speed it up a little bit, be a little more succinct. So I hope not to ramble too much on you, but it's a privilege to work on your building. It's a beautiful building. I think it's the best collection of stained glass in the Southwest of the United States, and it spans over 117 years. It's many different styles of glass. Many different artists were involved. A lot of people made these things happen. And I get the sense when I move around the church and talk to parishioners and staff that you appreciate what you have, that you're grateful for it, and we're going to try to help you take care of it. We did come to El Paso first in 2011, and we were starting to work on the stained glass dome in El Paso del Norte. We've worked on it a couple times and cleaned it. They haven't fully restored it. We've been working with their budget, and that's how we were sort of introduced to the city. The crew, and myself included, just love coming here. The people are so friendly. The food's great. And if you've ever been in Chicago in January, you really come to appreciate El Paso. That's Ed Thompson. He's one of our league master carpenters and works with the Glazers sometimes, and he's 6'5", so he reaches everything I can't. We've also did quite a bit of work on the plaza, working on all their historic specialties. We restored the chandeliers over the ambar. We did the vigas in the ceiling, the decorative finishes. We did the art glass ley lights. These were kind of interesting. There was only a fragment of glass left, and we recreated them from historic photos based on their original design, and we're really pleased with the results. Our in-house, we just work on glass and carpentry and metalwork, but we also have a stonemason subcontractor named, it's very similar, Rustic Restorations out of Chicago. Guys are all Polish, and they are very skilled. And we did some of the special masonry work at the plaza, including the arches here. They had all been coated with multiple layers of paint. There was actually a roof over that section. I don't know if anybody remembers being in there before the building was restored, but they restored those original cast iron arches. And we're using that same crew at Crest right now to restore the terracotta. Then they're going to come over and work on your rose window with us. So they're very, very good. You have a lot of resources within that, within your own archives that Bill introduced us to, and so we got a good sense of what was here even before we started digging into the research. We found some things that are a little misleading or incorrect, and I just wanted to let you know that when we get done with this project, we hope to submit a series of memos and reports and that you can update your documentation on your windows. A great book done, I think about 25 years ago by Mary Cunningham Hoover and dedicated to her daughter. And it was really well done. And it also built upon earlier research. We've made a lot of friends here, and one is in this audience today, Chris Caviglia. I wish I could get the right name. I can't roll my R's or any other letter. Chris actually went to school here in the mid to late 90s, and he works with Baker Glass. He's Naomi Baker's significant other. And it's kind of ironic because they introduced us to the project and to Bill, and when we came in, we said, well, why aren't you working on these? Well, we haven't done leaded glass since the grandfather's generation. And so we said, well, you should. So we're working with Chris, and he's learning the craft again from, this is Mark Redina from our crew, who's had about 40 years of experience in stained glass. And so it's going full circle, and we want to keep as much of the money in El Paso as we can. We couldn't be doing this without Baker. It's helping to reduce the cost of this work a lot. It would cost a lot more for us to bring people down from Chicago. And I just want to shout out to you, Chris. Thank you. couple of guys in their shop. This is Chris helping us get some templates of the windows. Not just Chris, but the staff here at St. Clement's, especially Jonathan, has been very helpful to us. Luis, your painter, has been doing a lot of work on the exterior that we'd normally have to bring labor down to help, and that is also helping to reduce the cost. So all these things are working in your favor and keeping money in the local economy. One of the earliest windows came from the old church, the Holy Bible window. It's currently out. Most of the stained glass we're trying to leave in place, do remedial repairs, and we're really emphasizing and focusing the exterior frame and protective glazing on the window. When it's in such bad condition, it's not stable, or it's so difficult to access, we are removing those windows to either do minor repairs over at Baker Glass or to take them back to Chicago, re-lead them, and bring them back. And so you're going to miss this window for a little while. It's going to be out. The frame was pretty rotted, and we're going to build a new frame to match it. We think this one, by the way, this is probably a studio out of Kansas City. It's undocumented. It's one of the things we're researching to figure out exactly who did it. There have been about 5 or 6 studios that have been involved here at St. Clement's. These windows were done by Andrew Vogel out of Chicago. This is a very famous image of the Good Shepherd that Bernard Plockhorst did. He was a German artist that came out of they called it the Nazarene movement in the early 19th century, to have these romantic images of depth of scene. They had perspective to them. You felt like you could walk into the image and just be there. Andrew Vett was in Chicago. There's a lot of connections between El Paso and Chicago. We find it a lot in the decorative arts. We have found that to be true down at El Paso Dornete and also at the Plaza, because Trost and Trost actually worked for Louis Sullivan in Chicago. So there's some connections that we are glad to continue. Your windows are just stunning. I mean, really, the nave windows are unbelievable. They're plated, so there's several layers of glass. There'll be a back plate behind all the flesh areas, and that gives them more this cameo effect, or the glow that you see in the window. It makes them very lifelike. And the details in the robes, if you have time and you really haven't studied your windows, just take some time and look at it for a while, because some amazing details will come out. This is a famous image, Christ knocking at the door, by Holman Hunt. The original is in St. Paul's, the third one is in St. Paul's Cathedral. He did a couple other early versions that are in other institutions in England, in Oxford, in the Manchester Museum. Just another image shooting up that window now of Christ knocking on the door, and you can see those layers of glass that are sandwiched or plated on the window. There are only 3 layers here that I can tell right now. We'd have to get them on a bench to be sure, but sometimes some Tiffany windows can get to be about 5 or 6 layers thick just to get the effect they want. Not from paint, but from different colors in glass to create that really beautiful opalescent look. The painting here is phenomenal. These are top flight artists that worked on your windows. And I mentioned earlier, this rabbi on the left is such a famous face. That's also a Holman Hunt face. And so the original oil, I'm not sure where that one is located, but it's copied by hundreds of studios around the United States and in thousands of churches. And it's always the same rabbi. And I actually met a rabbi in Chicago, looked just like him. Rabbi Wolf. Andrew Vett is a pretty well-known studio, but it's more regional to the Midwest. These are some windows in a congregational church in Galesburg, Illinois, but probably their biggest known commission. They have over 1,000 square feet of glass just in this main window on the left. But this is about 5 or 6 years before your windows started showing up here at St. Clement. There's a lot of art glass in the towers. I was going to take you into a few spaces that you probably don't get to on a regular basis. This would be the sub belfry. It's three tiers down and has the tall lancet windows in the tower. We hope to get those restored. As you can see, they've had leaks over the years where they've stained the walls. But I think this was an original color that was up there, that tan. Still some really spectacular pieces of glass, and even the little details around the wood frame. There's an egg and dark trim around it. No one's going to see that, but they went to the trouble to do it, and it's there. Up above in the sub-belfry, there's 4 oculus windows that are in pretty rough shape as well. They should be re-leaded. And because you spend so much money for access just to get to that point, it's kind of silly not to just do it once and for all. So rather than give you a 15 or 20-year repair, we want to give you a 100-year repair and really restore those so they last a long time. One of them has been rebuilt before. The original is on your left. The reproduction is on the right. And they did okay. We're going to do better. It's going to look more like that original. And you can see the detail that they backed off on to kind of save some cost. So now finally in the top belfry where you would see the louvers from outside, we don't plan on doing a lot of work inside. I think it's going to depend after we scaffold that area what needs to be required or shouldn't be left undone. But as we've talked about with Bill and others, if you're spending this money to scaffold and you're all the way up there, we don't want to just do the windows and then get back down. You want to go ahead and deal with the crosses and the louvers and masonry problems that you'll find up there so that you don't have to go back. This is a shot that's daylight right now from inside the tower, shifting stones and lost mortar. And so this would be a serious problem in Chicago. You have freeze-thaw damage and water getting in. Your climate is very forgiving on that right. On the same token, the sun is brutal on wood, and it breaks down the lignin in the wood and it deteriorates. So the wood sills are all rotting away on the tower. So it's not going to be just the glass we restore, but we're going to have to restore the wood frames as well. And then part of the survey I did a year ago was really just I'm being brought in to critique what they look like and what problems there are. And so some problems are pretty trivial, but there are paint drips from interior painters. There's plaster drips and things on the windows that just require better care in masking them off when you're working around them. So those things can be fixed. They're not hurting the window. It's strictly aesthetic, but could be avoided. After we did the survey of all the buildings, McKee and Kendrick and BMG and the original church, we sat down with Bill and George, and we had a conversation about where to start. And the vestry and all decided to start with the north elevation, which is largely complete now. We still have to do the baptistry window. But here's a shot before. We saw problems with the cross was leaning, and the paint was peeling on that. We wanted to get away from the yellow and hazy Lexan and all the frame members that break up the design of the window. They're introducing horizontal lines to Gothic. Gothic's not about horizontal, it's about vertical. It's about soaring, and you have to try to work with that architecture to make it look right. That's Naomi Baker on the left and nephew on the right, working with Mark Rodina from our studio to re-lead the Oculus window. They did a great job. There's the before on the left and the new window in on the right. Also restoring that frame back to that really beautiful sage green color. That's the original paint color we found on the frames. Shouldn't be white. It shouldn't be white anywhere. It doesn't go with the stone. It's a high contrast. So we think that's making a big difference as well. And it's those kind of details that just make it just right. Here's the cross that we brought down. There were birds' nest in it. The birds' nests do hold water. It's galvanized iron, so it was corroding a lot. And we found some original paint color on there that it wasn't supposed to be white. The reason it's those big, clunky, square profiles is that it's supposed to look like stone. And so we're going to paint that back to the original limestone color that matches the limestone trim on the church. There's your previous windows, and that's how they're coming along on the right. The color works, recessing the glass works. We're really thrilled about it. And avoiding a total stained glass restoration when it's not necessary. We're dealing with some of the windows, but most of these nave windows were in very good condition. They were extremely well built. Somebody had done previous work on them that was good, and there wasn't any compelling reason to pull them out for total re-lead. So this is one of the Baker windows. It's the middle window on the epistle side. I think it's a fabulous design, and the original artwork is still over at Baker on the left. The frame is set in that mat with the detail around it, and then the figurative scene is back behind that so they could shift that mat or make changes. You know, I've seen this scene in hundreds of churches around the country, but I mentioned in the first talk earlier and got a good laugh that I've never seen one with cactus. The prickly pear on the right. I love it. I love it. I've never seen it before. It's a really cool detail to find. One thing I didn't mention earlier is talking with bakers, I realized that they told me about a hotel in Douglas, Arizona has the Gadsden Hotel. If you ever get a chance to go over there, I rented a Harley one weekend and rode over to take a look at it, and it's stunning. It's about 40, 50 feet long and 6 feet, and it's all a desert scene with cactus images in it, and it's really beautiful opalescent glass window. So the rose window is the big project we're on now. It's why we were here this week. When we got up on the window, we really couldn't tell for sure the exact condition of the stained glass, and that was a little unnerving. We didn't have anything high enough to get up there from the inside during the survey a year ago, and the Lexan had yellowed so badly that we couldn't see through it enough to know the condition of the leaded glass. So we were going to have to do a step further and really start taking a piece off. What we did know is that there were a lot of problems, beautiful details of that window. There are a lot of problems really from the roof on, out of sight, out of mind. We got up there and the light fixtures had been broken for a number of years and were lying on the roof. There was debris and pigeon droppings and debris that's blown up there. The concrete cap that was designed to shed water over the top of the rose was all cracked up and breaking away. And the joints were opening up on the limestone frame around the window. As I explained earlier, heavy masonry towers like that just settle. They just do. Even if they have bigger foundations, it's a really common problem. And so as the tower settles, it pulls the gable with it. As the gable gets pulled with it, a round rose window will invariably become an egg or an oval. So this window is actually 3 inches wider than it is tall. It wasn't originally, but it's deformed over time, over 120 years of that settlement. And so the settlement's slow. I don't think it's a structural engineering issue beyond just now repairing this stone. Bill had mentioned the cost of this is around $150,000 at the earlier service, but I want you to know that's not just the glass. A big part of that is access, and over a third of it's just to repair the masonry and the frame around it. Those cracks around the exterior stone, it's limestone trim, but it's a granite wall, are step cracking down through. That's why you know it's a settlement movement, because it's not actually splitting through the blocks, but it's a step cracking, which is good. It means it's not as serious. And they're also telegraphing through the inside on the plaster. And so we'll repair that as well when we bring the window back. So there are some of the cracks. When you go up and look closely at the wall, you'll see them, and they telegraph down like at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock on the rows. It's just a really common problem. We've crossed it at many churches, and we're going to fix it. But this is some of the things that we learned when we started to take off that stained glass, the storm glass protective glazing. We found the depth of the frame. We could see that they had piggybacked their aluminum frame on top of the steel frame. So now we're losing that depth and the shadow lines that you get as light strikes across something, in a raking light. The windows are really, in a Gothic church in particular, designed to recede, also in Romanesque architecture. And they don't do that when they have this flat plane on top of them. They look very flat. It takes the life out of them because the play of light across that depth is what makes it more interesting and part of the architecture of the church. We also discovered that the lead was pretty much toasted after 120 years in that western sun, and a lot of lead cracks in the solder joints, and it really needed to be re-leaded. We're spending so much money to get up there and so much money to fix the stone frame. We didn't think this was the one that we should leave in place. And so I know you're going to miss your window for a few months, but it's going to come back better than ever, and it'll be there for another century. The stone frame had corroded, but not bad. We found good news when we got up and pulled everything off that we can salvage and reuse the frame. It's still really solid. The concrete ring around it had been cracking a little bit. We're going to repair that and stain it. There were about half a dozen BB holes in the window, maybe 22s or something like that, but probably used to take care of pigeons in the 70s. That's a really common thing we find at courthouses and churches. So we're going to repair all those holes. There was some cold paint on the glass that is going to be fired on. We're going to repaint it and fire it in. We're going to remove anything that doesn't look original. Sometimes people don't like things because they're too bright, and so they get toned down, but we try to go back to the original artist's intent, that they knew what they were doing. We'll lay them up in windows to make sure that they read properly. In the 70s, they didn't do a full restoration. They didn't pull that stained glass out, but they just used silicone, and they smeared it on, It's on her shoulder here on the right. And then silicone is just it just attracts dirt and dust, and it holds it. So we'll clean all that off, and we'll use a glass epoxy called Hextol, and we will glue those pieces together on the edge, and it won't be on the surface of the glass at all. Those things you don't see from the floor. You look up and you think, wow, it looks beautiful. And then you get up on it and you go, ugh, it's terrible. This is a shot of Vince, our metal fabricator, that's going to be building your steel frame for the baptistry window. He's going to be here for another few weeks. We'll start on that this week. And a couple of the custom tools we make to help dig out all the old putty. And I'm not going to tell you all our trade secrets, but that's a few things. This is another illustration of the famous image of Come Unto Me that is in Baker's studio. They did a few changes to it, but this is the 1930s window on the gospel side of the church, also in the middle, by Baker Glass here in El Paso. Baker Glass did the baptistry window and dozens of other windows around the church, and they're really fine windows. They were well built. Kudos to Naomi's grandfather. They're holding up really well. But one of the problems I didn't like about the aluminum frame on the baptistry window is this adding shadow lines to the window, and it didn't line up with that original Gothic steel frame. So we're going to build one where the sight lines match up exactly, and it won't cause those shadow line problems. The McKee Chapel windows, the Jacoby windows, are from St. Louis. They completely shifted styles now. They weren't working the Nazarene style anymore. They were working the Neo-Gothic style. And Koenig was a big impact on that, a famous stained glass studio artist out of Boston. But Jacoby and lots of other studios around the country followed suit. It's very two-dimensional now. It's very flat. Your eye stops right there at that window. Koenig felt that that was more important to focus on the architecture on the interior, that it shouldn't be something that keeps going, that your eye should stop there. And so he introduced a lot more blues too, where the color palette's completely different in McKee than it is in the main church. Anyway, they're beautiful windows. They're stone set, so they're not in a steel frame or a wood frame like the church windows. They're actually set into the limestone. And it's kind of fun. The stone has two grooves in it. One's deeper than the other, because people are always asking me, well, how does it stay there? How do you get it in? I'm going to reveal one trade secret. So one slot's deeper. You slide it into the one slot, and then you shift back. And then you mortar it in place. But you always have one groove deeper than the other. What's interesting is that before World War II, there was usually only one groove. But in your church, and many churches after World War II, there are two stone grooves. The first one's for the stained glass on the interior. The next one is for the storm glazing or protected glazing on the exterior. So you had two grooves, and it originally had protective glazing. Sometime over the years, others came along and sold a third layer of protective glazing, this plastic layer of Lexan, which is a polycarbonate, and the aluminum frames that piggybacked on top. So, even this, that drives me nuts. I hate this horizontal line that creates something. I want my eye to follow that curve, right? And so we're going to get rid of that when we get to McKee. And there's no reason for it. What I think happened, and what happens with many traveling gypsy glazers, as we call them, it's a bit of a derogatory term, is that they slapped this stuff on because they didn't have the stained glass trade anymore. It was fading out in the 1960s. And so plastic storm windows became a hot item. It's much like Tin Men, if you ever saw Tin Men with Richard Dreyfuss, and it's a comedy about selling aluminum siding. But it's a lot along, it's the aluminum siding of church windows. And didn't need it at all, but they weren't traveling with masons, and so they couldn't deal with that stone groove and the mortar. We're going to work with a mason. We don't have masons in-house either, but we're going to work with the same mason that works on your rows to reset that plate glass that's in there. You'll get rid of these flush plastic and aluminum frames. The window will recess again and look a lot like the windows on the church. So there's a good example. So here's our original plate glass. The stained glass is behind it yet in another groove. It's not quite showing up. There's still a layer in front of that, about 3 or 4 inches in front of that. That's part of this plastic layer that was just screwed into the stone. That's also problematic in that plastics move a lot in heat and sun. One thing El Paso's got a lot of, heat and sun. And so when it moves, if you don't drill those slots in an oval, that screw wants to hold tight, and so it's blowing out your stone. These are all things that we observed and we're trying to correct now. The windows, I understand Father John knows a little bit about your lead silhouette windows that were done by Baker in the late 50s. Gene Baker, is that right? And they are stunning. I love them. They're all throughout Williams Hall. The artwork is still there up in the hall. It was a great marriage and collaboration between Cisneros and Baker. And these are personally my favorites, just because I really like this style and technique. What they do is they take a sheet lead and they carve out the figure in the scene as a silhouette. And then they perforate it using X-Acto knives, sometimes awls or sometimes leather making tools, to create holes through it, that little piercings that let light through. Baker was doing a really interesting thing in that, letting it up in colored glass, and these different colors show through, like in the robes and the figure on your right. Then they float solder on top of that flat lead, and all of a sudden it creates a relief to it. It has this really tactile quality. It's really cool to just go up and you can touch them. Don't push them too hard, but you can touch them. It's not a museum. They're really stunning, and I love them. There's also some original artwork of one of those windows over at Baker. But this is a very old technique. It goes back to 6th century China. There was a style called Scherenschnitt that was a silhouette technique in Germany and Switzerland. And papel picado, I think that's close. A Mexican style of folk art that was a silhouette style of cutting things out. It became really popular in the United States in the 1920s. A couple famous artists were working on them around the Chicago area. One was from New York. The one on the left is by G. Owen Bonawit, and he was really the guy. Tiffany did this a little bit. He would have little pieces in the window that might have a lead overlay. Bonawit did the whole window with lead overlay. On the right is an example by a Chicago artist named Edgar Miller. Edgar was really cool. He grew up in Idaho, and he was very eccentric, but like a lot of artists are. Anyway, he did a different style. He would cut these silhouettes and sandwich it between two pieces of glass instead of a piece of glass sandwiched by two pieces of lead. And this is from the Palmolive building in Chicago. No one knows where this went. It's not there anymore, and we haven't been able to track it down. But Edgar's got a lot of other nice commissions around Chicago. We're getting close to the end. Griffin shows up around. Fred Griffin and Nancy Griffin did these windows in 72. Fred was working on the narthex windows in 69. Both very well done. Both completely different shifts artistically from the neo-Gothic and from the Nazarene-style windows in the church. Where we get very abstract. It was really popular style in the 1960s and 70s. And I think they're beautiful, but they're very unique. And everyone has their favorite around the church. These are made with slabs of glass, typically 3/4 or an inch thick. And this glass probably came from West Virginia. There was a glass manufacturer there named Blenco. And they did most of these slabs. And you would chip it on a table. If you go up and look at it, you'll see internal fractures in the piece, but they don't leak or anything because they're inside. So they called it faceted glass, slab glass. Dalle de Vere is the original name. Started in France, 1939, came to the United States in 1945, and kind of took over. They were a whole new style of doing ornamental glass. Originally cast in cast concrete, and then everybody realized, oh yeah, concrete keeps shrinking. Throughout its life, concrete shrinks. So they switched to epoxy by the 1970s, and your windows are epoxy, and they're still in great shape. They're over 50 years old, and the only thing I would do is some maintenance on the frames. That's the sanctuary before those windows of Griffin's went in, before the ceiling was dropped, and they had to take this window out. So I think you probably all know some of those changes that occurred during that remodeling. So the goals here, real quickly, I'm going to whip down through this. Replace hazed and yellow Lexan with laminated glass. Recessed frames in glass to enhance Gothic revival aesthetics. Restore the original exterior color scheme to harmonize with the natural stone. Restore woodwork and clean up perimeter edge details with new brick moldings and sealant. Remove art glass and stained glass windows for remedial repairs or reletting when necessary. Complete critical carpentry and masonry restoration to severely deteriorated frames and openings, like the rows. Stable and sound windows shall remain in place for future restoration to keep the cost down. We could restore everything 100%. Redesign storm window frames to align with sight lines of art and stained glass windows, eliminating shadow lines whenever possible. Clean and reputty art and stained glass windows to be covered with new protective glazing. Closed ventilator gaps found ajar. A lot of those were in the sanctuary to better seal gaps from dust and leaks. For us in Chicago, it's more about leaks. For you in El Paso, it's more about dust. Closed ventilators, improve reinforcement of art and stained glass windows where necessary. I liked Fred Griffin's work a lot. I think he was a good painter. They were interesting, the windows that are in the narthex. I mentioned earlier, I'm not trying to knock Fred, but he wasn't a very good engineer. And so we're finding places to reinforce those windows so they don't bow and buckle. If you ever looked at them closely, they kind of looked little wavy. Sometimes churches tell us, well, they meant to do that. They were trying to look old. They were meant to do that. They should be flat in a perfect plane. Set windows in their best architectural context whenever possible. Correct previous poor repairs. Address adjacent building features when scaffolding or lifts provide access as funds allow. The cross, the louvers. We cleared out the scuppers that were clogged and things like that. Update and revise your window history with new research when that comes to light. And I want to thank you very much. This Tiffany mosaic, we're not doing any work to it. Don't let anybody touch it. It's worth a lot of money. The Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Morse Museum, Tiffany's Morse Museum in Winter Park, Florida, would die to have this mosaic. Treasure it as you have for the past. Thank you very much.